Hi, and thanks again for joining me on another episode of Sealed for Good. Today we are talking about a topic which is very close to the heart of many of our customers and many industry players out there: balconies and decks, about waterproofing balconies and decks. And this is one of the most common waterproofing applications that are done daily around the country. And like wet areas, we're still seeing many failures out in the industry. And there remains a lot of confusion out there on how they are best built and waterproofed. So I start with why in 2017 are we still getting this wrong? And when it comes to waterproofing a balcony, what is it that's so complex? Or why can we not have consistency around the country? So there's a culmination of many factors that contribute to where we're currently at with balconies and decks that aren't waterproofed properly. And much of this relates back to design, poor design. If the design is not good, normally we see that it just escalates from there and snowballs from there, and that's base one. If your design is crappy and balconies haven't been built correctly, then the waterproofer is up for a major challenge, and in many ways shouldn't really be waterproofing if it hasn't been designed properly. But that's a different topic altogether. Inferior construction methods, new and untried building substrates. We are seeing many of those on the market, and many waterproofers will just rock up to a building site and see a substrate they've never seen before, no manual, no details, and they just go ahead and treat it like any other surface. Poor and wrong product selection is a big one. Understanding what the finish will be, what the challenges are, and ensuring that you select the right system for it. Poor application, which goes without saying, and poor detailing, which is very close to our heart and very important, because sometimes you can have a gun membrane system being used on site, and if all the detailing doesn't finish up properly, it'll compromise the quality of the finish and inevitably the failure of the waterproofing. So there are many considerations when waterproofing a balcony, and there's a lot of things that can potentially go wrong. So from my end, I look at the standards around the country, the selection of how we fix products and how they run in parallel to the BCA. And there's a lot of regulatory considerations you need to take into play here in compliance. And things like the BCA are one. There's the Australian standards for external waterproofing now with 4654.1 on the materials, and also 4654.2 on the design and installation of those materials. Then you have the manufacturer's recommendations and substrates and their specs and manuals on how the substrates should be installed. And I'm talking about things like Sky-On, structural sheeting, cement sheeting, which has been around for many years now, concrete, which is still the big play in commercial design, things like Hebel, and we're even seeing stuff out there like magnesium boards and other substrates that many haven't come across but do actually know how they should be installed or waterproofed. And so from my end, it's an annoying one because there's still a disconnect between the waterproofing membranes to be approved, but not for all substrates. Okay, and that is the issue, is that you might have approved membrane systems that are out there, and a waterproofer rocks up to site and decides to start waterproofing, but are they suitable for the substrates? And the standards don't actually call into play compliance of some of those substrates that I mentioned earlier. So there's this big focus on membranes being compliant, a big focus on making sure that they pass the tests in terms of durability and weather resistance, etc. now. But what about the surface we're bonding to? Do we know how they're going to behave? You know, believe it or not, there are still, you'll see not wet area timber, but you'll see marine ply being used on some decks and balconies externally. And how are you going to treat that versus a Sky-On substrate or a Hebel substrate or a concrete? And if you're telling me that it's all the same way, well, you're wrong. And that's where we need to get that right. And so that disconnect needs to be improved. So there's some key considerations, and many of them are covered by regulation. So membrane performance, yeah, it's an important one, 4654.1. There is still a lot of conjecture out there of whether we understand exactly what those challenges are and limitations are for the type of membrane you're using. If you read that standard, there's a different set of requirements for liquid membranes versus sheets. And that standard, as my technical department had highlighted, it covers both external decks and roofing. And so should we be having the one standard for both types of applications, because they are treated differently, particularly those that are tiled over versus the exposed systems. Substrate installation. Look, this is the big one. I still have brought with me copies of 2 manuals from Hardy's, and I'm not paid by Hardy's to promote it, but I still think these are fantastic manuals. They've been around for many, many years. This one's from 2006, and there's one from earlier than that with CFC compressed sheeting fixtures, and this one's Skyon, which is a 2016 edition. These are things where we should follow and get right. And unfortunately, if you look through these manuals, you can get them online, you would be shocked to see that you would rock up, if I rocked up today to 10 building sites that are building decks with Skyon or CFC sheeting, if 5 out of 10 were to this compliance that Hardy's recommending, I'm having a bloody good day. And the reality is, I wouldn't find that. And so we get that wrong right from the start, how they're installed. Things like joists and the minimum centres across how floor sheeting should be installed. I am talking more about structural sheeting now. The way the sheets are laid a specific way, the spaces between them. Are the sheet joints sealed? Should they be sealed? If you read these manuals, they should be, and I dare say that some of the other major companies now that have got structural sheeting for decks and balconies would be suggesting the same. The allowances for expansion joints over a certain size, and are the joints meant to be carrying through to the tiling finish if it's going to be tile fixed on top, or are the joints supposed to have some other method of sealing and preparation in waterproofing them successfully. So the substrate installation is the most critical piece. If that's wrong, which goes hand in hand with the design, then you really are back to square one and you're going to get it wrong, and you're just pushing a barrel of water uphill and hoping for the best, because that is where, if, like I said before, a lot of applications fall down because of the fact that those sheets aren't installed correctly, and when they are, it allows the applicator and the other trades on top to flow on and do the job properly.